The first time Natalie Palmer's fingers trembled on the ivory keys was the night Ethan Durant walked through the swinging doors of the Silver Spur Saloon in Muskogee, Oklahoma territory, and everything she thought she knew about her life shattered like a whiskey glass thrown against the wall. It was August 1889, and the heat pressed down on the town like a heavy blanket, making everyone irritable and quick to anger. Natalie had been playing piano at the Silver Spur for 3 years now, ever since she turned 18 and realized that her parents' small farm wasn't going to support them all anymore. She was the oldest of 5 children, and when her father broke his leg in a plowing accident, she knew she had to do something. The saloon owner, a gruff but fair man named Marcus Kane, had heard her playing at church one Sunday and offered her a job on the spot. The pay was decent, and more importantly, it kept her family fed. She played every night from 6 until midnight, her fingers dancing across the keys while cowboys drank and gambled and occasionally fought. She had learned to tune out the noise, to let her music create a bubble around her where nothing else mattered. The regulars knew not to bother her much, and the ones who did learned quickly that Marcus didn't tolerate anyone harassing his piano player. But this cowboy was different. Natalie noticed him the moment he entered because everyone else did too. The conversations didn't stop exactly, but they shifted, became more cautious. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore dusty traveling clothes and had the look of a man who had ridden far and hard. A gun sat low on his hip, tied down in the way that meant he knew how to use it. He didn't head to the bar like most men did. Instead, he stood just inside the doors for a long moment, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. Then he walked straight toward the piano, his boots making soft thuds on the wooden floor. Natalie kept playing, a lively tune that usually got people's feet tapping, but her heart had started beating faster. She could feel his eyes on her as he approached, and when he stopped right beside the piano, close enough that she could smell dust and leather and something else, something clean like soap, she finally looked up. "Evening," he said, his voice low and rough like he hadn't used it much lately. "Evening," she replied, her fingers never missing a note. She had learned that trick early. Never stop playing unless Marcus said so. "You play beautifully," the cowboy said, and there was something in his voice that made it sound like more than just a compliment. Like he really meant it, like her music had touched something in him. "Thank you kindly," Natalie said, keeping her eyes on the keys now. She had received plenty of compliments before, usually from drunk men who wanted more than just music from her. She had learned to deflect them politely and keep playing, but this man didn't move away. He stood there, silent now, just listening. Natalie finished the lively tune and transitioned into something slower, a melody she had written herself on sleepless nights when the heat made it impossible to rest. She rarely played her own compositions in the saloon, but something about this stranger made her want to. When the song ended, he was the only one who clapped. His hands came together slowly, deliberately, and when she looked up at him again, his eyes were intense, focused entirely on her face. "What's your name?" he asked. "Natalie Palmer," she said, and then, because it seemed rude not to, "And yours?" "Ethan Durant," he said. "I just rode in from Texas, looking for work on one of the ranches around here." "The Patterson spread is hiring," Natalie heard herself say, "about 5 miles north of town." "Much obliged," Ethan said. He hesitated like he wanted to say something else, but then someone called for another song and Natalie had to turn back to the keys. She played 3 more songs before she allowed herself to look up again, and when she did, Ethan Durant was sitting at a table in the corner, a single glass of whiskey in front of him, untouched. He wasn't watching the card game happening at the next table or the dancing girls who had come out for their nightly show. He was watching her. This continued for a week. Every night, Ethan would come in around 7, order a single whiskey, and sit at that same corner table. He never drank more than half the glass. He never joined any of the card games or talked much to anyone else. He just watched Natalie play, and somehow, his attention never felt threatening or uncomfortable. It felt like he was really listening, really hearing what she was trying to say through the music. On the 8th night, he approached the piano again during her break. Marcus allowed her 2 10-minute breaks during her shift, and she usually spent them outside in the alley, getting some fresh air and resting her hands. "Miss Palmer," Ethan said, falling into step beside her as she headed for the back door. "Might I have a word?" Natalie paused, her hand on the door. Marcus was watching from behind the bar, she noticed, ready to intervene if needed. But something in Ethan's face, open and earnest and almost nervous, made her nod. "All right," she said, "but I only have 10 minutes. "That's all I need," Ethan said. They stepped out into the alley, where the air was marginally cooler than inside. The sun had set an hour ago, but the heat still radiated from the buildings. Natalie leaned against the wall, flexing her fingers to keep them loose. "I got the job," Ethan said, "at the Patterson Ranch. Started 3 days ago." "That's good," Natalie said. "Congratulations." "The work's hard but honest," Ethan continued. "The pay's decent. Mr. Patterson says if I prove myself, I could make foreman in a year or 2. Natalie nodded, not sure why he was telling her this. Men often wanted to talk to her about their lives, their problems, their dreams. She had learned to listen politely and then excuse herself. But Ethan seemed to gather himself, squaring his shoulders like he was about to do something difficult. "Miss Palmer, Natalie, I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't think me too forward." "Go on," Natalie said carefully. "I have never heard anyone play piano the way you do," Ethan said, and his voice was so sincere that Natalie felt her breath catch. "When I listen to you play, it's like you're telling stories without words. It's like you're painting pictures in the air. I have been traveling for 2 years, ever since my parents died and I sold our farm in Texas. I have been to a dozen towns, heard a dozen piano players, and none of them made me feel the way your music makes me feel." Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks, and it had nothing to do with the temperature. "That's very kind of you to say." "It's not kindness, it's truth," Ethan said. He took a step closer, but not close enough to crowd her. "Natalie, I know I have no right to ask this. I know we barely know each other, but I have to try because I have never felt like this before and I don't think I ever will again." "Ask what?" Natalie whispered. Ethan took a deep breath. "Play only for me forever." The words hung in the air between them, huge and impossible and somehow exactly right. Natalie stared at him, her mind racing. This was crazy. This man was essentially asking her to marry him, to commit her life to him, and they had barely spoken more than 100 words to each other. "Mr. Durant," she began, but he held up a hand. "I know how it sounds," he said quickly. "I know you must think I am insane. But I am asking you to give me a chance. Let me court you properly. Let me prove that I am serious, that this is not some passing fancy. I am 24 years old, and I have never asked a woman to marry me before. I have never wanted to until I heard you play." "You want to court me," Natalie said slowly, "because of my piano playing." "I want to court you because when you play I see your soul," Ethan said simply. "And it's the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I want to know the woman who can create that kind of beauty. I want to know what makes you smile, what makes you sad, what you dream about when you lie awake at night. I want to know everything." Natalie's hands were shaking now, and not from playing. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Ethan said softly. "Say you will let me try." If after a month you feel nothing for me, I will leave you alone. I will even leave Muskogee if that's what you want, but give me 1 month to show you that this is real." There were 1,000 reasons to say no. Natalie barely knew this man. He could be dangerous, unstable, dishonest. She had her family to think about, her job, her reputation. Saloon piano players already walked a fine line in terms of respectability. Getting involved with a cowboy could ruin what little standing she had. But when she looked into Ethan Durant's eyes, she saw something that made all those reasons seem small and insignificant. She saw honesty. She saw hope. She saw a man who was putting his heart in her hands and trusting her not to crush it. 1 month, she heard herself say, but I have rules. Relief flooded Ethan's face, making him look younger, almost boyish. Anything. You call on me at my family's farm properly, Natalie said, her mind working quickly. You meet my parents. You behave like a gentleman. And you understand that my family depends on my income from this job, so I will not be quitting any time soon. I would never ask you to quit something you love, Ethan said. And I will be the most proper gentleman you have ever seen. When is your next day off? Sunday, Natalie said. I play at church in the morning, then the afternoon is my own. Then I will call on Sunday afternoon if that is acceptable, Ethan said. Where is your farm? Natalie gave him directions, and they stood there for another moment, just looking at each other. Then the back door opened and Marcus stuck his head out. Break's over, Natalie, he said, giving Ethan a hard look. Everything all right? Everything's fine, Marcus, Natalie said. Mr. Durant was just leaving. Ethan tipped his hat to her, a gesture that was old-fashioned and oddly charming. Until Sunday, Miss Palmer. Until Sunday, Mr. Durant, Natalie replied. She watched him walk away, his long legs covering the ground quickly, and then she followed Marcus back inside. Her hands were still shaking as she sat down at the piano, but when she started to play, the music came out clear and sweet and filled with something it had never had before: hope. The rest of the week passed in a blur. Natalie told her parents about Ethan's upcoming visit, and her mother immediately went into a flurry of cleaning and cooking preparation. Her father was more skeptical, wanting to know everything about this cowboy who had apparently caught his daughter's eye. He works at the Patterson Ranch, Natalie explained on Saturday evening as she helped her mother with the dishes. Her younger siblings, ranging from 17 down to 8, were doing their various chores, and the small farmhouse was full of noise and life. He seems honest and hardworking, and he has been very respectful. A man who spends his evenings in a saloon is not someone I would immediately trust, her father said from his chair by the fire. His leg had healed, but it still pained him when the weather changed. Papa, I work in that saloon, Natalie reminded him gently. And you trust me, her father sighed. That's different and you know it. You are there to work to help this family. This man, this Ethan Durant, what is he there for? To listen to me play, Natalie said, and even to her own ears it sounded improbable. Her mother, a practical woman named Sarah who had married young and worked hard every day of her life, gave Natalie a long look. Do you like him? I barely know him, Mama, Natalie admitted. But yes, I think I do. There is something about him that feels right. Then we will meet him tomorrow and make our own judgments, Sarah said firmly. But you will not be alone with him, understood? Not until we know his character. Yes, Mama, Natalie said. Sunday morning, Natalie played at the small church where the Palmer family had attended for years. Her fingers flew over the keys of the old organ, leading the congregation through hymns that everyone knew by heart. She caught herself scanning the pews, looking for a tall figure with dark hair, but Ethan was not there. She felt a small stab of disappointment before reminding herself that he had said Sunday afternoon, not morning. After the service, Natalie helped her mother prepare dinner. They roasted a chicken, made fresh bread, and put together a pie from the apples they had stored in the cellar. It was more food than they usually had for Sunday dinner, but Natalie did not comment on it. She knew her mother wanted to make a good impression, to show that they might be poor but they were not lacking in hospitality or skill. Ethan arrived at 2 in the afternoon, riding a decent-looking horse and wearing clean clothes. He had shaved and gotten his hair cut, and when he dismounted and tied his horse to the fence post, Natalie felt her heart do a strange little flip in her chest. She met him at the door before he could knock, suddenly nervous in a way she had not been at the saloon. "Mr. Durant," she said. "Welcome." "Miss Palmer," he said, removing his hat. "Thank you for having me." Natalie led him inside, where her entire family was gathered in the front room. Her father stood slowly, leaning on his cane, and extended his hand. "I am Robert Palmer," he said. "This is my wife Sarah and our other children, Daniel, Mary, Lucas, and little Emma." Ethan shook Robert's hand firmly. "Ethan Durant, sir, it is an honor to meet you all." What followed was one of the most nerve-wracking hours of Natalie's life. Her father questioned Ethan thoroughly about his background, his prospects, his intentions. Ethan answered every question honestly and directly, explaining that his parents had died of fever 2 years ago, that he had sold their small farm in Texas to pay their debts, and that he had been working his way north ever since, looking for a place to settle down. "And you think Muskogee is that place?" Robert asked. "I think it could be, sir," Ethan said, his eyes flickering to Natalie. "If I have reason to stay." Sarah served dinner, and the conversation became easier. Ethan talked about his work at the Patterson Ranch, about his plans to save money and eventually buy his own land. He was good with Natalie's younger siblings, answering Lucas's excited questions about cattle drives and listening patiently, while little Emma told him a rambling story about her doll. After dinner, Robert grudgingly agreed that Ethan and Natalie could sit on the front porch as long as the door remained open. They sat in the 2 old rocking chairs, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. "Your family is wonderful," Ethan said quietly. "You are lucky to have them." "I know," Natalie said. "I worry about them constantly. Papa's leg means he cannot work like he used to, and the farm is not producing enough to support us all." "Is that why you work at the saloon?" Ethan asked. Natalie nodded. "Marcus pays me fairly, and it is enough to make up the difference. But I worry about what will happen when my younger siblings are older, when they need more." "You take care of everyone," Ethan observed. "Who takes care of you?" The question surprised Natalie. No one had ever asked her that before. "I take care of myself," she said after a moment. "Maybe you should not have to," Ethan said. He was looking at her with those intense eyes, and Natalie felt like he could see right through her, past all the walls she had built to protect herself. "Mr. Durant," she began, but he interrupted gently. "Ethan. Please call me Ethan." "Ethan," Natalie said, testing the name on her tongue. "You said you wanted to court me because of my music, but I am more than just a piano player." "I know that," Ethan said. "Or at least I want to know that. That is what this month is for, is it not? For us to really see each other." "And what if you do not like what you see?" Natalie asked. "What if the reality of me is less appealing than the dream?" Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hat dangling from his fingers. "I will take that risk," he said. "Because I have a feeling that the reality of you is going to be even better than the dream." They talked until the sun set, about everything and nothing. Natalie told him about learning to play piano from an old widow who lived in town, about the songs she wrote in her head while she worked. Ethan told her about growing up on a farm, about losing his parents and feeling unmoored ever since. "Until I heard you play," he added. "Then for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I had found something worth staying for. When Ethan finally left, promising to call again the following Sunday, Natalie stood on the porch and watched him ride away. Her mother came to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "He seems like a good man," Sarah said quietly. "He does," Natalie agreed. "But you are still scared," her mother observed. Natalie nodded. "What if I am wrong? What if I let myself care and he leaves, or worse? What if I marry him and realize I made a mistake?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "When I met your father, I was 17 years old. He was 19, just starting his farm. My parents did not approve, thought he would never amount to much. But I looked at him and I knew deep in my bones that he was the one I wanted to build a life with. Was it always easy? No. Have we struggled? Yes. But I have never regretted my choice, not for one single day." "How did you know?" Natalie asked. "I cannot explain it," Sarah said. "But when you know, you know. And I think, my darling daughter, that you already know." Natalie went to work that night with her head full of thoughts of Ethan Durant. When she sat down at the piano, her fingers found a new melody, one that was bright and hopeful and just a little bit scared. She played it over and over, letting it evolve and grow, and when she looked up, Ethan was there at his usual table, his eyes on her, a small smile on his face. He stayed until her shift ended at midnight, and when she emerged from the saloon with Marcus's stern warnings to go straight home, Ethan was waiting with his horse. "I will walk you home," he said simply. "That is not necessary," Natalie protested. "I walk home every night by myself." "I know," Ethan said. "Marcus told me. He also told me that if I ever hurt you, he will personally shoot me. But tonight, I would feel better if I knew you got home safely." It was a 15-minute walk to the Palmer farm, and Ethan led his horse beside her, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his presence. They did not talk much, but the silence was comfortable, broken only by the sound of cicadas and the distant howl of a coyote. When they reached the farm, Ethan tipped his hat to her. "Sleep well, Natalie." "You too, Ethan," she said. She watched him mount his horse and ride off toward the Patterson ranch, and then she slipped quietly into the house. But she did not sleep well that night. She lay awake, thinking about storm-gray eyes and calloused hands, and a voice that said her music was beautiful. The month that followed established a pattern. Ethan called every Sunday afternoon, spending time with Natalie and her family. He brought small gifts, nothing extravagant but thoughtful. A length of ribbon that matched Natalie's eyes, a bag of peppermints for the younger children, a book of poems for Natalie that he had bought from the general store. Every night, he came to the saloon and listened to her play, and most nights, he walked her home afterward. They talked about everything. Natalie learned that Ethan had been the only child of older parents, that he had learned to read from his mother and to work the land from his father. He loved horses and had a gift for training them, which was why Mr. Patterson had given him additional responsibilities at the ranch. He had never been in love before, never even come close. "I am not good with words," he confessed one night as they walked. "But music, your music, that speaks to me in a way words never have." Natalie told him about her dreams, the ones she barely acknowledged even to herself. About wanting to compose music, real music, not just playing other people's songs. About wondering what it would be like to play in a real concert hall instead of a saloon, to wear a beautiful dress and have people come just to hear her play. "You could do that," Ethan said. "You are talented enough." "It is not about talent," Natalie said. "It is about opportunity and money and connections, none of which I have." "Not yet," Ethan said. "But who knows what the future holds?" As the month drew to a close, Natalie realized that she was in trouble. She had promised herself she would be careful, that she would guard her heart, but Ethan Durant had somehow slipped past all her defenses. She found herself thinking about him constantly, looking forward to Sundays, and her late-night walks home with an eagerness that both thrilled and terrified her. On the last Sunday of the month, Ethan arrived with a picnic basket. With her parents' permission, he and Natalie rode out to a spot by the creek, far enough from the farm for privacy but close enough to be proper. They spread a blanket under a cottonwood tree and ate the food Ethan had packed: fresh bread, cheese, cold chicken, and strawberries. "The month is almost over," Ethan said when they had finished eating. "I told you I would give you a month to decide, and I am a man of my word." Natalie's heart was pounding. "I know." "I need to know, Natalie," Ethan said, turning to face her fully. "Have I proven myself? Do you feel anything for me, or have I been fooling myself this whole time?" Natalie looked at him, at this good, honest man who had somehow changed her entire world in just 1 month. She thought about the way her heart lifted when she saw him, the way she played differently when he was listening, the way she had started imagining a future that included him. "You have not been fooling yourself," she said quietly. "I feel everything, Ethan, and it terrifies me." Relief and joy flooded Ethan's face. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I have spent the last 3 years taking care of everyone else," Natalie said, the words tumbling out now. "I have been strong and responsible and practical. But with you, I do not feel practical. I feel reckless and hopeful and like I am standing on the edge of something huge, and I do not know if I am ready to jump." Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong. "Then let me jump with you," he said. "You do not have to do this alone, Natalie. That is what I am trying to tell you. If you will have me, you will never have to be alone again." "What are you asking me?" Natalie whispered, even though she knew. "I am asking you to marry me," Ethan said. "I know it is fast. I know people will say we are crazy. But I love you, Natalie Palmer. I love your music and your strength and the way you take care of everyone around you. I love the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on a difficult piece, and the way you smile at your little sister when she tells you silly stories. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you every single day." Tears were streaming down Natalie's face now, but she was smiling. "I love you too," she said, and saying the words out loud felt like flying. "I love you, Ethan Durant, and yes, I will marry you." Ethan let out a whoop of joy that startled the birds from the trees, and then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her close but carefully, like she was something precious. Natalie buried her face in his chest and breathed in the scent of him, feeling safer and happier than she had in years. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I bought this 2 weeks ago," he admitted. "I was probably too confident, but I could not help myself." Inside the box was a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was not extravagant, but it was beautiful, and when Ethan slipped it onto her finger, it fit perfectly. "I will buy you a bigger one someday," Ethan promised, but Natalie shook her head. "This one is perfect," she said. "It is ours, and that makes it perfect." They rode back to the farm hand in hand, and when they told her parents, her mother cried happy tears, and her father shook Ethan's hand with a warmth that had not been there before. "You take care of her," Robert said gruffly. "She has been taking care of all of us for too long. It is someone else's turn now." "I will, sir," Ethan promised. "I will take care of her for the rest of my life." They decided to wait 3 months to marry, to give them time to save money and prepare. Ethan wanted to build them a small house on land he was planning to buy from Mr. Patterson, a plot near the creek where they had gotten engaged. Natalie would keep working at the saloon until the wedding, and afterward, they would figure things out together. The news spread quickly through Muskogee. Most people were happy for them, but there were some who gossiped, saying that Natalie was foolish to marry a cowboy she barely knew, that it would end badly. Natalie tried not to listen, but it was hard sometimes, especially when she was tired and her hands ached from playing. But then Ethan would be there, waiting for her at the saloon, his eyes lighting up when he saw her, and all the doubts would fade away. He started bringing his own supper to the saloon on nights when he could get away from the ranch early, sitting at his table and eating while she played. During her breaks, they would step outside and talk about their future, about the house he was building and the life they would have together. "I want you to have your own room for music," Ethan told her one night. "A place where you can compose and practice without anyone bothering you." "We will need that money for practical things," Natalie protested. "Furniture and cookware and seed for planting." "Music is practical," Ethan insisted. "It is what makes you happy, and your happiness is the most practical thing I can invest in." 2 months before the wedding, something happened that changed everything. A man came into the saloon one night, well-dressed and clearly not a local. He ordered an expensive whiskey and sat near the piano, listening intently to Natalie play. When she took her break, he approached her. "Miss Palmer, my name is Charles Whitmore," he said, handing her a card. "I own a music hall in St. Louis. I am traveling through the territory looking for talent, and I must say, you are extraordinarily gifted." Natalie stared at the card, her heart pounding. "Thank you, sir." "I would like to offer you a position," Whitmore continued, "playing at my music hall in St. Louis. The pay would be 4 times what you are making here, and you would be performing for a much more refined audience. You could even begin composing your own pieces if you wished." It was everything Natalie had ever dreamed of, handed to her on a silver platter. But as she stood there looking at Charles Whitmore's expectant face, all she could think about was Ethan, about the house he was building for them, about the life they had planned. "I am very flattered, Mr. Whitmore," Natalie said slowly, "but I am engaged to be married. My life is here now." Whitmore frowned. "Miss Palmer, opportunities like this do not come along often. You would be wasting your talent staying in a place like this." "My talent is mine to waste," Natalie said, her voice firmer now. "And I do not consider building a life with the man I love to be a waste. Thank you for your offer, but my answer is no." She walked away before Whitmore could respond, stepping out into the alley where Ethan was waiting, as he always was during her breaks. When she told him what had happened, he was quiet for a long moment. "You should take it," he finally said. Natalie stared at him. "What?" "Natalie, this is your dream," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "This is everything you told me you wanted. I cannot be the reason you give that up." "You are not making me give up anything," Natalie said fiercely. "I chose you, Ethan. I chose us. And I would make the same choice 100 times over." "But what if you regret it?" Ethan asked, and she could hear the fear in his voice. "What if 10 years from now you look at me and resent me for being the reason you stayed in Muskogee instead of going to St. Louis?" Natalie grabbed his hands, holding them tightly. "Listen to me," she said. "I have been making practical decisions my entire adult life. I have been doing what needed to be done, what was responsible, what would help my family. And those were good decisions, necessary decisions. But loving you is not practical, Ethan. It is not responsible or necessary. It is a choice I am making with my whole heart because you make me happier than any amount of money or fame ever could." "Are you sure?" Ethan whispered. "I have never been more sure of anything," Natalie said. "I want you. I want our life together. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I want to play piano for you in our home and maybe for our children someday. That is my dream now, Ethan. You are my dream." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she felt him shaking. "I love you so much," he said into her hair. "I promise I will spend every day trying to make sure you never regret this choice." "I will not regret it," Natalie promised. "I could never regret you." The next 2 months flew by in a flurry of preparation. Natalie's mother made her a wedding dress, simple but beautiful, with lace that had belonged to Sarah's grandmother. Ethan finished building their house, a small but sturdy structure with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a front room where Ethan had placed a beautiful upright piano as a wedding gift. "How did you afford this?" Natalie asked, tears streaming down her face when he showed it to her the week before the wedding. "I saved every penny I could," Ethan said. "And Mr. Patterson helped me find a good deal. He knows a man in Tulsa who was selling. It is not new, but it has been well maintained, and I thought you could use it for composing." Natalie threw her arms around his neck, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "It is perfect," she said. "You are perfect." They were married on a bright October morning in 1889, with both their families present and half the town in attendance. Marcus gave Natalie away, looking gruff and uncomfortable in his Sunday best, but his eyes were suspiciously wet when he placed her hand in Ethan's. The ceremony was simple, held in the same church where Natalie had played organ every Sunday. But when the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," and Ethan leaned down to kiss her for the first time, Natalie felt like the whole world had shifted into place. This was where she was meant to be, who she was meant to be with. There was a small celebration afterward at the church hall, with food and music and dancing. Natalie played piano for a while, with Ethan sitting beside her on the bench, his arm around her waist, and later, when someone else took over the music, they danced, swaying together in the crowded room. "Are you happy?" Ethan whispered in her ear. "I am so happy I could burst," Natalie whispered back. That evening, Ethan carried her over the threshold of their new home, both of them laughing. The house was small and simple, but it was theirs, and Natalie had never loved a place more. They sat together on the porch as the sun set, watching the sky turn pink and gold and purple, Ethan's arm around Natalie's shoulders and her head resting on his chest. "I am going to love you forever," Ethan said quietly. "Every single day for the rest of my life." "And I am going to play only for you," Natalie replied, "just like you asked. Well, and maybe for our children if we are blessed with them." "That sounds perfect," Ethan said and kissed the top of her head. Natalie continued to work at the saloon for another year, though now Ethan often came with her, helping Marcus with various tasks around the place in exchange for his meals. The regulars got used to seeing them together, and more than one old cowboy commented that Ethan Durant was the luckiest man in the territory. Natalie's family remained close, with her siblings often visiting the little house by the creek. Ethan taught Daniel and Lucas about ranching, and sometimes they would help him with work around their property. Emma loved to sit beside Natalie while she played the piano, her small fingers trying to imitate the movements. "Will you teach me to play?" Emma asked one day. "Of course," Natalie said, "as soon as you are big enough to reach all the keys." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Ethan worked hard at the Patterson Ranch and was promoted to foreman, just as Mr. Patterson had promised. The extra money allowed them to buy more land, to start planning for the future. Natalie continued to play, both at the saloon and at home, filling their little house with music. 18 months after their wedding, Natalie realized she was pregnant. She told Ethan one evening as they sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Ethan went very still, and then he turned to her, his eyes wide. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Natalie said, smiling at his expression. "Are you happy?" Instead of answering, Ethan picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "Happy, Natalie, I am the happiest man alive. We are going to have a baby." He set her down gently, immediately concerned. "Should I not have done that? Are you all right?" "Do you need to sit down?" Natalie laughed at his sudden nervousness. "I am fine, Ethan. Pregnant women are not made of glass." But Ethan fussed over her constantly from that day forward. He insisted she stop working at the saloon after her 4th month, worried about her being on her feet so much. Marcus was understanding, hiring a new piano player but making it clear that Natalie's job would be waiting for her if she ever wanted it back. "I think I am done with the saloon," Natalie told Marcus when she played her last night. "But thank you for everything. For giving me a job when I needed one, for treating me with respect, for walking me home on nights when Ethan could not be there." "You are a good girl, Natalie," Marcus said gruffly. "And you play like an angel. That new fellow I hired is not half as good, but he will have to do." Their son was born in late spring of 1891, during a thunderstorm that shook the windows of their little house. The midwife, an older woman named Mrs. Brennan, who had delivered half the babies in Muskogee, declared him healthy and strong, with a good set of lungs based on his immediate wailing. Ethan held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Natalie, he is absolutely perfect." They named him James after Ethan's father, and he was indeed perfect. He had Natalie's dark hair and Ethan's gray eyes, and from the very beginning, he seemed to respond to music. Natalie would play the piano with James sleeping in a basket beside her, and he would wake up the moment she stopped, as if demanding she continue. "He is going to be a musician like his mother," Ethan said proudly. Life with a baby was chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Natalie had never been so tired or so happy. She played less often now, her time consumed with caring for James, but when she did play, it was with a richness and depth that had not been there before. Motherhood had opened something new in her, a well of emotion that poured out through her music. When James was 6 months old, Natalie received a letter from Charles Whitmore, the music hall owner from St. Louis. He had heard through various channels that she had married and had a child, but he wanted to extend his offer one more time. He was opening a new, larger venue and would pay even more than he had originally offered if she would consider relocating to St. Louis. Natalie read the letter once, then folded it carefully and placed it in the stove fire. She did not even mention it to Ethan. That door had closed the night she chose him, and she had no regrets. 2 years later, their second child was born, a daughter they named Rose. She was smaller than James had been, more delicate, but with a will of iron from the moment she entered the world. Where James was content to listen to music, Rose wanted to make it, banging on the piano keys as soon as she could reach them. "I think we are going to have 2 musicians," Natalie said, laughing as Rose created a cacophony of sound. "As long as they are happy," Ethan said, scooping Rose up and blowing raspberries on her stomach until she shrieked with laughter. Ethan continued to work at the Patterson Ranch, but he also started breeding horses on their own land. He had a gift for it, an intuition about which horses to breed together, and within a few years, his horses were known throughout the territory for their strength and temperament. The extra income allowed them to expand their house, adding on more rooms and a proper music room for Natalie. The music room had large windows that let in the southern light, and the piano sat in the center, with chairs arranged around it. Natalie spent hours there, composing pieces that she would play for her family in the evenings. She never published her compositions, never tried to become famous, but she did not need to. Playing for the people she loved was enough. When James was 7 and Rose was 5, Natalie started teaching them properly. James took to it naturally, his small fingers learning the scales and simple melodies with ease. Rose was more impatient, wanting to play complicated pieces before she had mastered the basics, but her passion was undeniable. "They are both so talented," Natalie told Ethan one night after the children were in bed. "More talented than I was at their ages." "They get it from you," Ethan said, pulling her close. "Everything good in them comes from you." "That is not true," Natalie protested. "James has your patience, and Rose has your determination." "Then they are lucky to have both of us," Ethan said and kissed her softly. The years passed quickly, filled with work and music and the everyday joys and challenges of raising a family. There were hard times too, years when the crops failed or when illness swept through the community. But Ethan and Natalie faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing season. When Natalie's father died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 67, Ethan held her while she cried, and then helped her plan a beautiful funeral. When Ethan's prize stallion died unexpectedly, Natalie sat with him in the barn until dawn, not saying anything, just being there. They celebrated their 10th anniversary with a picnic at the creek, in the same spot where Ethan had proposed. Their children played in the water while Ethan and Natalie sat on a blanket, watching them. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had gone to St. Louis?" Ethan asked quietly. Natalie looked at him in surprise. "Where did that come from?" "I was just thinking about that night when that man offered you the job," Ethan said. "You gave up so much for me, Natalie. Sometimes I wonder if you ever regret it." Natalie took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "Listen to me, Ethan Durant. I have never regretted choosing you, not for one single second. Do you know what I would have had in St. Louis? Fame, maybe. Money, possibly. But I would not have had you. I would not have had James and Rose. I would not have had this life, this beautiful, messy, perfect life. And I would trade all the fame and money in the world for one more day with you." Ethan kissed her then, deep and thorough, not caring that their children might see. When they pulled apart, he was smiling. "I love you," he said. "More than the day I married you, more than yesterday, more than I will tomorrow, which I did not think was possible." "I love you too," Natalie said. "Forever." As the children grew older, their talents blossomed. James was quieter, more introspective, composing melodies that were hauntingly beautiful. Rose was all fire and passion, playing with a technical skill that surpassed even Natalie's. By the time James was 15 and Rose was 13, they were both accomplished musicians. "They should have proper training," Natalie told Ethan one evening. "Training I cannot give them. They are ready for a real teacher, someone who studied at a conservatory." "There is a music teacher in Tulsa," Ethan said. "I heard about him from Mr. Patterson. He studied in Boston and moved west for his health. Maybe we could send them for lessons." And so began a new routine. Once a month, Ethan would drive the children to Tulsa for lessons with Professor Martin, a stern but kind man who recognized their talent immediately. The trips were expensive, but Ethan and Natalie agreed it was worth it. "Our children will have opportunities we never had," Ethan said firmly. "That is what parents do. We give them more than we had." When Rose turned 16, Professor Martin suggested she audition for a music conservatory in Boston. She had the talent, he said, to become a professional musician if she wanted. Rose was excited about the possibility, but to everyone's surprise, James was not. "I do not want to go to Boston," he said when the family discussed it. "I want to stay here, work with horses like Pa. Music is something I love, but it is not what I want to do with my life." "Are you sure?" Natalie asked, searching her son's face. "I am sure, Ma," James said. "I am not like Rose. She needs music to breathe. I just enjoy it." In the end, They decided that Rose would go to Boston for the conservatory, but only after she turned 18. She needed to be old enough to handle living away from home, and they needed time to save the money for tuition. Those 2 years were bittersweet for Natalie. She was proud of her daughter, excited for her future, but also heartbroken at the thought of her leaving. But she understood better than anyone the pull of music, the need to pursue it wherever it led. When Rose finally left for Boston in the fall of 1903, the whole family went to the train station to see her off. Rose cried and hugged everyone multiple times, promising to write every week. "Make us proud," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I will, Pa," Rose promised. "Remember where you come from," Natalie added. "Remember that all the technique in the world means nothing if you do not play with your heart." "I will never forget, Ma," Rose said, hugging her mother one last time before boarding the train. They stood on the platform and waved until the train disappeared from sight, and then Natalie buried her face in Ethan's chest and cried. He held her tightly, not saying anything, just being there like he always was. Life was quieter with Rose gone. James, now 20, was working full-time with Ethan, breeding and training horses. He had inherited his father's gift with animals, and together they had built the business into something substantial. James had also started courting a local girl, the daughter of the blacksmith, and Ethan and Natalie suspected an engagement was not far off. Rose wrote regularly, long letters full of details about her studies, her teachers, her new friends. She was thriving, but she was also homesick. "I miss you all so much," she wrote in one letter. "I miss hearing Ma play every evening and Pa's terrible jokes and James's quiet presence. Boston is wonderful, but it is not home." After 2 years in Boston, Rose returned for a visit. She was different now, more polished and sophisticated, but still fundamentally the same Rose. She played for them the evening she arrived, and her skill had grown tremendously. Her fingers flew over the keys with a precision and confidence that took Natalie's breath away. "You are amazing," Natalie said when Rose finished, tears streaming down her face. "Rose, you are just amazing." "I learned from the best," Rose said, hugging her mother tightly. But there was something sad in Rose's eyes, something Natalie recognized. Later that night, after Ethan and James had gone to bed, Natalie and Rose sat on the porch together, just as Natalie and Ethan had done so many times over the years. "What is wrong, sweetheart?" Natalie asked gently. Rose was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "I am good, Ma, really good. My teachers say I could have a career, that I could perform in concert halls all over the country, but that is not what I want." "What do you want?" Natalie asked. "I want to come home," Rose said, her voice breaking. "I want to teach music here to children who would never otherwise have lessons. I want to be near family. I want to find someone to love the way you and Pa love each other. I thought going to Boston was my dream, but now I realize my dream is here." Natalie felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had worried that Rose would never come home, that she would stay in Boston and build a life far away from them. "Then come home," she said simply. "Come home and build the life you want here." "But I spent all that money on tuition," Rose protested. "All those hours practicing, all that time away from family, it feels like a waste." "It is not a waste," Natalie said firmly. "You learned and grew and discovered what you really want. That is never a waste. And now you will use all that training to teach others, to share your gift." "That is beautiful, Rose." Rose hugged her mother tightly, crying now. "Thank you, Ma. Thank you for understanding." Rose returned to Boston to finish her final year, but when she graduated, she came home to Muskogee. She opened a music school in town, offering lessons to anyone who wanted to learn, regardless of their ability to pay. Within a year, she had 24 students, and the sound of music filled her small studio 6 days a week. She also met a young lawyer named Thomas, newly arrived in Muskogee and looking to establish his practice. They fell in love quickly, and when Thomas asked for Rose's hand in marriage, Ethan gave his permission gladly. "He is a good man," Ethan told Rose. "And he looks at you the way I look at your mother." James married his sweetheart, Catherine, 6 months before Rose married Thomas. The two weddings, both held at the same church where Natalie and Ethan had married, were joyous occasions that brought the whole community together. Natalie and Ethan became grandparents several times over in the years that followed. James and Catherine had 3 sons who all inherited their grandfather's way with horses. Rose and Thomas had twin daughters who showed musical talent from an early age, and later a son who preferred books to music, but was bright and sweet-natured. As the years passed and Ethan's hair turned silver and Natalie's hands grew more stiff with age, they settled into a peaceful routine. Ethan retired from the ranch, leaving the business to James, but he still spent time with the horses every day. Natalie no longer played as often as she once had, her arthritis making it painful, but she still composed, humming melodies that Rose would later transcribe for her. They sat on their porch every evening, just as they had when they were young, watching the sun set over the land they loved. Sometimes their children and grandchildren would visit, filling the house with noise and chaos and joy. Other times it was just the two of them, sitting in comfortable silence, not needing words to communicate what they felt. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the house for a celebration. There was music and food and laughter, and at one point, Rose convinced Natalie to play. Natalie's fingers were stiff, and the playing was not as smooth as it once had been, but the emotion was still there, the heart that had made her music special all those years ago. When she finished, everyone applauded, but Natalie only looked at Ethan. He was watching her with the same expression he had worn that first night in the saloon, 41 years ago, like her music was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. Later, when everyone had gone home and they were alone again, Ethan took Natalie's hand. "Do you remember what I asked you that night in the alley behind the saloon? How could I forget?" Natalie said, smiling. "You asked me to play only for you forever." "And you have," Ethan said softly. "Every day for 40 years you have played only for me, not just on the piano but with your life, with your love. You have made my life a symphony, Natalie." "And you have made mine a love song," Natalie replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "The most beautiful love song ever written." They sat there in the gathering darkness, two people who had taken a chance on love and built a life more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. The cicadas sang their evening chorus, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the rising moon. Inside the house, the piano sat silent, but the music of their life together still echoed in every corner, in every memory, in every beat of their hearts. Ethan and Natalie lived well into their 80s, long enough to see their grandchildren marry and have children of their own. They were beloved figures in Muskogee, the old couple who still sat on their porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset. People would point them out to visitors, telling the story of how a cowboy had walked into a saloon and asked the piano player to play only for him forever, and how she had said yes. When Ethan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 86, with Natalie beside him holding his hand, the whole town mourned. He had been a good man, a fair employer, a devoted husband and father and grandfather. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched in various ways. Natalie lived for 2 more years after Ethan's death, and though she grieved deeply, she did not let the grief consume her. She was surrounded by family who loved her, and she spent her remaining time teaching her great-grandchildren simple songs on the piano and telling them stories about their great-grandfather. "He was the best man I ever knew," she would tell them. "He taught me that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice you make every single day. And I chose him every day for 60 years, and I would choose him again." On a warm spring evening in 1935, Natalie Palmer Durant died quietly in her sleep, in the same bed where she had slept beside Ethan for 6 decades. She was 88 years old, and she had lived a full, beautiful, love-filled life. Her funeral was held at the church where she had played organ as a young woman, where she had married Ethan, where she had watched her children and grandchildren marry. Rose played at the service, performing one of her mother's original compositions, a piece Natalie had written years ago entitled simply, "Forever." They buried her beside Ethan in the town cemetery, under a cottonwood tree similar to the one where they had gotten engaged all those years ago. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, James had inscribed a simple message. She played only for him forever, and he loved her for eternity. The little house by the creek passed to James, who maintained it lovingly, keeping his mother's music room exactly as she had left it. On quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right, people swore they could hear piano music drifting from the house, a beautiful melody that spoke of love and devotion and promises kept. Rose continued teaching music in Muskogee for many more years, and many of her students went on to become musicians themselves. But none of them ever forgot the story she would tell them about her mother, the saloon piano player who had given up fame and fortune for love, and had never regretted it for a moment. As the years passed and Muskogee grew and changed, the story of Ethan and Natalie became part of the town's history, passed down from generation to generation. It became a symbol of true love, of choosing what matters most, of building a life on a foundation of devotion and commitment. Their great-great-grandchildren, some of whom never met them, would visit the cemetery on anniversaries and leave flowers on the graves. They would sit beneath the cottonwood tree and imagine what it must have been like, that first meeting in the saloon, that moment when a cowboy asked a piano player to play only for him forever. And in their imaginations, they could almost hear the music, see the young woman at the piano and the tall cowboy watching her with love in his eyes, the beginning of a story that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of love and the beauty of a promise kept. The end.